I am really delighted to have been invited to speak to this assemblage of scholars on a subject dear to my heart, the interdependent web of all existence of which I am a part, and you are too. Of course, my dear friend Paul Mankiewicz could have told me about this event long ago, but he filed such things in his prodigious memory bank as completed once he has communicated the information by ESP, and I was notified this week. Dr. Mankiewicz, his wife Julie, and I met in the Bronx Botanical Gardens, which was my private park for rearing my young children. One day I met a certain Dr. Kazimiroff and Teresa Leto there, and they were talking about preserving our natural species and keeping the beauty of the borough, its rivers, its landmass and streams pristine for future generations. The South Bronx was burning. You all read about that. Bronx is burning. Drug dealers were on every corner hawking their wares. The schools were in disarray. But these people declared that the rivers and estuaries of New York City shall not be sewers, and that the horseshoe crabs would come to spawn still on Orchard Beach. The children shall walk among flowers and blossoming trees. They introduced me to Paul and Julie, who introduced me to Gaia, and came to my house on bicycle, because they didn't have a car. They wouldn't dare drive a car, to talk about the greening of the Bronx. I taught at a school that sat on the banks of the Bronx River. I told them that before I was married, I spent hours with Pete Seeger on the Clearwater, singing folk songs and urging industries on its banks to halt the spewing of waste in the Hudson. Maybe we could do something similar on the Bronx River. So that summer, I wrote for a grant to pay teachers and buy supplies to develop the young teens there as environmentalists. And we're showing you the picture of those kids in their t-shirts. They're the environmentalists, and these are the other kids who were part of the student council, who really ran the school at that time. I had it set up so that these kids did various things, but the environmentalists were leaders, and our motto was each one, reach one. And this is how we tried to develop this school in the Bronx. After I wrote the grant, the kids were so eager and highly animated. They wanted to put their hands in the soil to rid the banks of our little stretch of the river of invasive plants. And so this is what they were going to be taught how to do. Originally, they were afraid of the damp soil. They had to learn to put their hands in it. They had to learn the value of earthworms. They had stepped on them before. They were just fascinated when they saw that they could regenerate. If you broke them in half, they would make two of them. They learned that the soil was not something that was dirty, and that they could do a lot to help with the making our land beautiful again. I got the community board to hire unemployed men to clear out debris, tires, mattresses, and all kinds of waste. Passers-by and motorists threw off the low bridge of Tremont Avenue, which crossed beside our school. To litter was okay. This was the Bronx, this was the waste borough, and so that on the streets, in the parks, in the water, it was acceptable to litter. The children felt that way too. They would heave discarded sneakers across telephone wires so that they'd hang down, dangle, very ugly. And they would uh, throw their unwrapper, unused, when they finish with their cans or bottles or whatever, they would just throw them in the street. They had to learn the difference. They thought every bug was a roach and every snake was somehow evil and had a mythological, very sinister history. So it was important for them to understand that ants, beetles, grubs were part of the web of nature and he belonged to them. I'm not really ready for all these things yet. It took a lot of talking and dedicated teachers to dissuade these youngsters from that position and to get them ready to lead, to believe that they were responsible for the earth and that they had a part in in guarding. They were actually guardians of the work of the earth. It took Paul and Julie, who got them to test the Bronx River water every week for a study of its oxygen and pathogen content. When they learned that Smith College women were also doing that kind of work, the kids were ecstatic. They considered themselves valuable scientists, and the whole project became the go-to thing at the school. They would beg, absolutely beg me to be excused from class and really shaped up to do their homework because they had to meet stringent scholarship requirements to even be a part of it. Last year, Netflix had a series called The Get Down about the South Bronx neighborhood where rap, hip hop, and graffiti were born. And you saw I'd like to show you the train. Could they see the train again with that's it. This is the kind of thing that was all over the Manhattan, but a lot of the work was done in the Bronx because that's where the trains would stand in these yards and the kids would go out at night and paint these images on the trains. I was a teacher and administrator in an intermediate school in 1970s and 80s when children found plastic gloss paint and developed the street art, which became known as graffiti. Their parents' memory of capoeira, the box dancing of Brazil and Latin America, might have influenced the street dance, which they called break dancing, and the African-American slave Pat and Juba rapping or playing the dozens may have been the genesis of hip hop and rap. The teenagers in my school were on the cutting edge of this emergent art form. While the incidents in the book actually happened, the characters are composites and most dialogue imagined. Yet you'll get to know some of the trials that children were enduring as they made their way through the drug war and invented and have very inventive adolescence. One of the stories is about a spray painter, and we'll show you two photos of how they used to do the trains. There's a spray painter. Now, actually, that's exactly how they did it. And this could be the young man who's in one of the stories I write, who was killed when these trains moved. One of the trains moved and he got caught in there. But they used to spray these paints at night, trains at night. He'd spend the whole night out there doing the trains and of course, be a very sleepy student the next day if he did come to school. So these teenagers were really on the cutting edge of this art form. And one of the stories that in the book is about this painter. Another one is about a drug dealer, and he eventually got killed, and they put his portrait in graffiti on the wall like this. This is what they would write about the kid. Now, this boy in my school began being a mule when he was 9 years old, very bright. And the story, one of the stories in my book, Children Are the Barometers, is about this boy. Another story is about a troubled girl who had a very serious problem. And she found solace in working on the river. She'd love to come out there just to be, she'd say, she'd just beg. And I would let her go, even though she did have some schoolwork problems. She wasn't doing that well, but she was a really bright and good girl. But she was having some serious problems, and I would let her go out to work on the riverbank, and she was one of the most conscientious workers out there. All that was more than 30 years ago, Paul, but the memory is ever new. In the 90s on 53rd Street in Manhattan, far from where we used to do this painting, this work, one was calling me. I heard this voice, Miss Tanner. And it was two of my students who remembered our newspaper and writing about the work on the riverbank. My daughter is an engineer, gardener, environmentalist herself, because she used to travel with me on the estuaries of New York. And I have a butterfly garden on the property where I now live, because the will to save the planet and its creatures stirs my aching heart, 93-year-old heart, as it does them. And I have to still be up and doing. Last year, I met a super guy at the Smithsonian at a lecture on Russian opera. What a coincidence for us to meet, fall in love, and marry when most folks are consigned to wheelchairs and willing to wait in their rocking chairs until the curtain falls. For our honeymoon, we went on a safari to Kenya and Tanzania. I was enthralled by the scenery, by the Maasai, by the magnificent animals in their natural setting. We saw Lake Manyara, where 400 bird species crowded the waters. We went to the Ngorongoro crater, the world's largest caldera, resplendent with vegetation and very steep. We went to the Maasai village, talked with children, talked with adults, and I was relegated to talk mainly with women. They wouldn't let me speak at all to young girls. And I thought that maybe they thought my assertiveness would encourage them to be less submissive, but whatever, they wouldn't let me talk with young girls. And I wanted to. I love to talk with teenagers. Then we saw the grasslands. They were abundant with wildlife that were grazing. We saw cheetahs show off their speed. Zebras nibbled as lions lounged nearby. They knew that the lions had just eaten, and unlike humans, they wouldn't stuff themselves or exert themselves to have another catch. And this is one of the elephants. This was at an elephant's orphanage where this elephant's mother had been killed, and they found him and a lot of other elephants. And he's red like that because they roll themselves in this red clay. And this man is feeding him from a bottle. And so this is at one of the animal nurseries, really, where they take care of orphan elephants. We also saw big cats snoozing, primates chattering, grooming each other. And many families of elephants were marching in single file across the plains. Giraffes and eland and all manners of ungulates were selecting their favorite grass or leaves for lunch. Each year, the wildebeest stampede across the Serengeti, running to water in the highlands as the plains become dry. These are those wildebeest, and you see them, just masses of them. It's just amazing to see that many animals. This is the Great Migration, and we saw the end of it. The Maasai call the place Serengeti, the place where the land moves on forever. And a welcoming sign as you enter says that Serengeti is forever. But it cannot be unless. Large spaces of the grassland have grass the animals cannot eat. Invasive species. These plants were brought in as seeds on the wheels of trucks, blown in and now proliferating, crowding out the nutritious wheat or other cereal grass that had been native there. I asked the guides about it and they said, oh, we can't remove it, it's natural. And the Serengeti must remain as God made it. I have great photos of this grassland, but of course, my cell phone wouldn't cooperate and send anything. So these are just these are some from pictures I had on my computer. That's where serendipity comes in. Paul's daughter, Phoebe, whom I knew as a little baby, is now a grown-up woman and a scientist who works with invasive roots. And I'm urging her father to encourage her to take on the great Serengeti and make it a nutritious grassland again. The magnificent Mount Kilimanjaro is losing its snow cap. And here's a picture of my husband and me in front of it, and you can just barely see the mountain. This was in the morning light, but it's still, we were very lucky that it wasn't surrounded by clouds. We've had problems like this in the US. Kudzu, a vine from Japan, inundated the greenery in Georgia and had to be virtually pulled out. Similar vines are choking trees all along the East Coast and must be got rid of. I am pleased to talk with young people about this. I'm pleased to talk with you young and energetic scientists and hear your solutions to humans' misuse of the resources of our planet. I know the future is in good hands, that the Serengeti may be forever, that the Bronx River shall meander clear and unencumbered, because you and the people you train will take care of it. And these are our two books the two books that I wrote. This Children Are the Barometers, that's about these kids in the South Bronx. And Driving in Second is a book about my trip through the South when it was a really segregated place in 1954, when the Supreme Court decision said that segregated schools were illegal. Thank you very much.